Secretary Hegseth was very clear about the need for a NATO 3.0, an alliance rebooted for the modern age. On that, we all agree. We heard the US announcement to review force posture in Europe. In today's dynamic security environment, I think it is prudent to ensure NATO's forces are optimally arrayed to deter conflict and, if necessary, to defend against any threat.
Now, France 24's Dave Keating is standing by in Brussels, and we can go across to him now. Dave, good afternoon. Talk us through the reaction we've been getting from member states to this announcement from Washington.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, spent most of that press conference that we just saw a clip of defending the decision and rationalizing it. So his spin on this is that this will have a more realistic assessment of where the troop levels are, that basically the previous plans for how many U.S. troops and equipment would flood into Europe if Russia were to invade is outdated because European countries have been increasing their defense budget. So it makes sense to update that. However, I'll say he faced a very skeptical audience in that room among the press. He was asked flat out if this is actually being done to punish European countries for not participating in the Iran war, as many in the Trump administration have suggested. He pointedly did not answer that question. He was also asked about his claim that this will be done in close consultation with European NATO allies. He was asked for specifically what kind of close consultation will be going on. He didn't provide any answers on that. And in fact, he said, if the United States wants to use the data that NATO has, for instance, then they can use it, implying then that there are no plans at this moment for actual consultation. There's no details there. So what we have now is this review will be going forward. The U.S. will be looking at each NATO country and what their current capability is, and then reassessing how many troops it needs to have at disposal, again, as a contingency, if an invasion were to take place. Rutte was also asked about Pete Hegseth's comments when he came in calling NATO a paper tiger, something that Trump has also said in the past. Again, he diverted away from any types of questions. It was the usual press conference role that Mark Rutte has had, where he is spending almost the entire press conference defending the United States, defending Donald Trump, even amid a lot of skepticism in the room. He also had to defend Hegseth because Hegseth came in, kind of excoriated the European NATO allies, and then left. He left early, didn't stay to listen to all of the other defense ministers. In the end, though, they were glad that he showed up at all, because both he and the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio have been skipping these summits lately. So actually, they were just glad that he was there, because at least to them, it showed a level of continued U.S. engagement that they weren't sure about before.
Yeah, Mark Rutte is very good at defending the U.S. Policies. Now, Dave, later on, we're also going to have a EU Council summit taking place with Ukraine set to feature on the agenda.
Yeah, that's where I am now, here at the European Council. The European prime ministers and presidents will shortly be arriving within the next hour or so, and Ukraine is on the agenda. Now, I think we're going to hear from them as they enter in the red carpet behind me. The same things that we were hearing from defense ministers this morning over at NATO, which is that Ukraine is turning the tide in the war. Ukraine is winning the war on Russia, and war against Russia, defending itself from Russia, I should say. But they're also newly encouraged by Donald Trump's relative cooperation earlier this week at the G7 summit in France, where he did not block these G7 conclusions, saying that the West would continue defending Ukraine. There's a lot of optimism about that. At least that's what we're hearing publicly from leaders. I will say, behind the scenes, when you talk to people here in Brussels, I think the thinking is that Trump was actually just more distracted by the Iran war and didn't really feel like engaging with the Ukraine issue, so just signed off on these statements because it doesn't really mean anything if he signs on them or not. But that being said, we didn't hear a huge pushback against Ukraine from Pete Hegseth at today's NATO summit, as he has in the past. In the past, he's come in and said it's unrealistic for Ukraine to expect to regain its lost territory in a peace settlement. We heard a lot of criticism of NATO countries. We didn't hear criticism of Ukraine from him today. That being said, as I mentioned, he left early, and he did not meet with Vladimir Zelensky, who was here in Brussels today.
Interesting point. Thank you very much for that, Dave. Dave Keating reporting that for us from Brussels.